a good time tonight. So anyhow, before I get to all of my announcements, so I was going to ask Richard and Sally. You say, Sally, your dad lives up here in Payson? How often do you get up here?
Not too often.
Not too often. So you live down in Globe? Okay. Well, Richard, come on up and say a few words, introduce yourself, and why you're running for sheriff. And then let me know if you want to get on our email list, so if you're ever up here on Tuesdays, you can come to the tea party. Because we meet every single week, and we have great speakers. So, they say. Okay, Richard.
You have to excuse me for a minute. I take off my readers so I can read. Anyway, my name is Richard Shaw. I've been a policeman for 30 plus flipping years, including 3 agencies. I first started my law enforcement career as a military policeman in the United States Marine Corps.
There we go.
There you go. Hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, I also did a tour in Iraq as an advisor, worked for the U.S. State Department for a company called DynCorp International. I worked firsthand with the Iraqi police, eating with them, sleeping with them, patrolling with them, both mounted and dismounted patrols. Sorry. My wife, Sally, sits over in the corner. We've been married for 35 years, I think that was? Yes, 35 years. Together we have 6 children in total. I married her with 2, adopted those 2 out, and gave them my name. Had 3 more, and then adopted my youngest boy, which would be my grandson. Let's see. My entire law enforcement career has been totally in the lower part of Gila County, working for the 3 different agencies I told you about. And I've been doing a pretty good job down there. First of all, I want to tell you that I'm not a politician. As you can probably see, I'm a little nervous, a little sweat coming up my brow maybe. Okay, I'm not a politician. I'm not a career politician. And I do appreciate Adam being here. I consider Adam a friend. I think he's a good guy. I'm not going to say anything evil about anybody. I think that everybody has to carry their own crosses. And if somebody wants to say something evil about me or evil about Adam, that's on them, not on me. I'm not going to do that. I don't think it's right. If I'm elected as sheriff, by any stretch of the imagination, you don't like me in 4 years, it's okay, fire me. I don't care. I really don't. I'll go find some other job. I looked for a job when I found this one. I found this one, so no big deal. So anyway, that's I'm probably a little under the 5 minutes you offered me, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Well, does anybody have any questions? There's
Yes, sir.
Frank.
Yes, sir.
I asked the current sheriff this question. I asked you, if there was an unconstitutional law passed, how would you deal with your deputies?
Okay. First of all, I'm going to answer that in a couple different ways. First of all, I'm a Second Amendment advocate. I'm an NRA member. If a unconstitutional law was written, I'm telling you right now, I am not going to enforce that law. I am a very strong Second Amendment man. My guns and I are very close. I give them all girls' names. Okay, none I've ever dated. That's just for my wife. My wife asked me about that one time, and she goes, "Why are you getting your guns after women?" I said, "It's a Marine thing. That's the only girlfriend you're going to have in combat." And besides, if I aim one after her, then if I sold it or traded it, she might get a little mad.
Yeah.
So that's why. No, that's totally unconstitutional. I fully support the Second Amendment of the Constitution, fully. And anybody that would like to go against that, you better look at the Fourth Amendment and probably, I believe, the 15th.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Okay, this is Richard. Do you go by Richard?
You can call me anything but Dick.
Anything but Dick, okay. Okay. All right.
That's an old story, my mom.
I know. I had a brother named Richard. He went by Dickie. So, anyhow.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good to meet you. And we'll hopefully have you back another time. Okay. So without further ado, it seems like everybody is here. We will entertain the exceptional privilege of hearing from Andy McKinney. Now, Andy, way back in 2007 or 8, when I met Andy, there wasn't a thriving Republican club in town. As a matter of fact, there wasn't much of anything. There was the Payson Citizens Awareness Committee. Did you go to that one?
Nope.
I did. Okay, and Bill, who is probably home watching the returns, was part of that group and all. And then we found the Payson Tea Party in 2009 in February. Andy was part of that group that organized the Stand for Freedom, the rally, the No More Taxes, Taxed Enough Already rally that was in front of the post office area, and that's where I met him. And the name of the group at the time was the Sons and Daughters of Liberty, right? Yep. How long had you been studying? You were studying DVDs from this guy by the name of Sal Russo, who was a libertarian, was he not?
No idea.
No idea. Well, that's what Shirley Wayand told me, and she was part of that original group too. Anyhow, so we decided we were going to go see the Republican Club, and we went up by the airport, and there were like 6 old men and us. I mean, because we were young at the time. And we're going, well, this isn't much of a deal. And so we decided to build the Payson Tea Party. And we did that for a number of years until he got elected to Star Valley Town Council, which meets on Tuesday night. So he doesn't get here as often as he used to. So anyhow, he can tell you some more thoughts on that. But besides that, he has spent a lot of time in Alaska. And when he was in Alaska, he read lots of books, and he watched lots of movies, and he wrote a book about the Middle East. And so he has been studying the Middle East for a long time, and he's going to tell us what he learned. So welcome to Andy McKinney. Oh, sorry about that. I trapped him. Oh, he likes to use this thing, huh? Okay, let me get this out of the way some more. There we go. Whoops. Okay. All right.
I have some written remarks so that I won't forget what it is that I had intended to say, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. As Shirley said, a few years ago I did write a book called The Armed Forces of Iran, and maybe if we have time later I'll be able to talk a little bit about Iran. If not, you guys can see me after if you have any questions about that. That's kind of my bailiwick. So in the short time that I have here tonight, I just want to focus on 2 topics. One is the life of Muhammad, and second is Islam as an ideology. And I know that we have people in the room who have had firsthand experience in Muslim countries. And I want to talk a little bit about Muslims and but to start with, Muslim, what is a Muslim and what is Islam? I think we need to get those in our brain and figure out which is what. The term Muslim refers to people, to actual human beings. In the West, the equivalent term would be Christian. Again, Christians are people. Islam, however, is a body of holy literature. It's a comprehensive totalitarian ideology. And the literature starts with the Quran, and I think we've all at least heard of the Quran, but also
Is too loud?
It's too loud.
Back off the mic just a little bit.
Is that better?
Yes.
The less you can hear me, the better it is. Okay. Anyway, there's the Quran. There's also the Hadith, which is the traditions or the sayings of the prophet. And there's also the Sirah, which is the teachings or the doings of the prophet. So these two books together are called the Sunnah. The two books of the Sunnah together and the Quran make up the holy books of Islam. And these books are holy in the same way that the Bible is holy to us. But remember, Muslims are people. Now, does anybody in here personally know a Christian?
Know a Christian?
Anybody personally know a Christian? Okay, good. Everybody. Does anyone here know a Christian who does not always, every single day, love his neighbor as himself?
Yeah. Oh, well, there.
Okay, there we are. Well, no Christian always loves his neighbor as himself all the time. If we fail to live up to the golden rule at all times, many of us do, and Muslims are the same. Most Muslims do not adhere to every jot and every tittle of their holy books, although they know they should. Some Muslims, however, just like some who name themselves Christians, mostly just observe holidays and follow the conventions. Others try mightily, think of Mother Teresa, try mightily to live up to their instructions in the Holy Book, the Bible, all the time, 24/7. It's the same with Muslims. Humans who follow the holy texts of Islam, and remember, Islam is the collection of writings, the religion. Some Muslims simply observe the holidays and that's it. Some might be very dedicated, but not well informed. I remember hearing of a Muslim in the Philippines who very proudly announced that he had memorized the entire Quran. Now, to memorize the entire Quran is an admirable and not all that uncommon act in the Muslim world. It's a thing to be proudly aspired to. And so when someone asked the guy in the Philippines who had memorized the Quran what it meant, he said, "I don't know. I don't speak Arabic." So there are Muslims who are very devoted, but not necessarily well informed. But others try as hard as a human being can try to follow all the rules, well, to follow them religiously. But there is in every imaginable range of devotions to the faith and the understanding of the faith. The Muslims are people, fallible humans. Islam, however, is the body of holy books, the written ideology. The holy books are immutable, unchangeable. The Quran, after all, was dictated by the angel Gabriel himself. And we just can't mess around with that, can we? It wouldn't be right, and it wouldn't be prudent. For us, the mass of lip service followers to Islam are not a problem. I've worked with guys from Egypt, Albania, Bangladesh, and Bosnia, all Muslims. None of them gave a bit of trouble to anybody. They were just guys I worked with one time or another. The problem for us comes from the millions who take that ideology of Islam with deadly seriousness. So I was going to set that aside for a moment and just define a couple of more terms. I'm sure all of you have heard the terms Sunni and Shia. And the world of Islam is divided into, these are the two greatest groups within Islam, the Sunni and the Shia. They had a difference of opinion in the 7th century, and they still take it quite seriously. Since then, the original difference of opinion has expanded to many, many differences of opinion. But it began in the 7th century over a dispute of who would follow Muhammad as the head of the Islamic State and the Islamic religion. Most Muslims are Sunnis. They follow the Sunni tradition. About 15% of Muslims are Shia. Shia live mostly in Iran and Iraq. A majority of the people in Iraq are Shia Muslims. There are more in the Lebanon and Syria area, but they're a minority group there. Elsewhere, from Morocco to Egypt, from Turkey to Saudi Arabia, in Kazakhstan, in Pakistan, and on to Indonesia, the people are Sunni. Now, how do they regard one another? Well, to the Sunni, the Shia are apostates. Again, remember, Muslims are people. There is every possible degree of devotion and adherence to the faith, to the rules. But the rules, according to the Sunni, the Shia are apostates, the followers of a corrupt and poisoned faith, and thus are worthy of death. To the Shia, the Sunnis are apostates and worthy of death. To both branches of the Islamic faith, we are infidels, unbelievers, and for that reason, we are worthy of death. There's a magazine called The Muslim Voice, and in the March 2013 issue, it said, if anyone wants to know about Islam, one should judge Islam by the Prophet's life and by his teachings. So Islam, the ideology, consists of the Quran and Muhammad. Remember the two books, the doings of Muhammad and the sayings of Muhammad. The doings of Muhammad, the sayings of Muhammad, and the Quran make up the three holy books. Muhammad had an active life as a preacher, as a ruler, and a warlord in a 22-year period between 610 and 632. So they've been around for a long, long time. He died about age 61. He engaged in the caravan trade prior to becoming a religious teacher. In the course of his life, he had 13 wives. His favorite was Aisha. He officially married her when she was 6 years old, and he was in his 50s. He generously held off consummating the marriage until she was 9. Aisha was the daughter of Abu Bakr, who was the first caliph who succeeded Muhammad as ruler of the Islamic State and the head of the religion. Marriage in the old days often helped to build strong political ties. She later became an important transmitter of what we now refer to as the Sunnah. She was in a position to be able to record or have recorded her remembrances of the things that Muhammad did and the things that Muhammad said. So she was a primary source for the two other holy books besides the Quran. When he was about 40 years old, he took to meditating in a cave outside of Mecca for extended periods of time. About 1610, the angel Gabriel began dictating to him what would become the Quran. His wife became the first convert, and Abu Bakr became the second convert. His message of monotheism had a hard time getting any traction in Mecca. I'm sure most of you have seen photos of the Kaaba, the big thing in the middle of Mecca with big black building. that time, the time of Muhammad, the Kaaba was not there, but it held, it was there, and it held the holy images, the pagan idols, and other religious items for nomadic tribes all across the Arabian Peninsula. There were, I think, if I remember correctly, 127 different worship traditions being presented or represented in the Kaaba. So people came there, whatever their cult, their religious cult was, would come to Mecca on their holidays and hold their festivals and their religious rites. So that Mecca became a host to religious pilgrims from all over the place, kind of a holy tourism, which, of course, anybody who's been to Orlando and understands that tourism can be a good business. And the people in Mecca made good money in taking care of the visitors when they came. And this was a long, long established tradition. They've been doing it for centuries. And one of the most prominent local gods was one named Habu. We'll come back to him in a minute. Allah, however, was a name for a god that predated Islam. Before there was Islam, there was a god whose name was Allah. Muhammad's own father, again, prior to the establishment of Islam, his father was Abdullah, slave of Allah, still a very common name in the Middle East. Muhammad fostered Allah as the name, not for just the most important God in his mind, but for the one and true God, the only God, the monotheistic God. In Mecca, people would not have any of this one God folderol, wrecked everything. Monotheism was bad for business, as well as blasphemous if you happen to be a devotee of Baal or one of the other 127 gods that were worshipped there. His opponents could not touch him. Muhammad was under the protection of a powerful clan leader. But Abu Talib, his protector, eventually died. And then his opponents tried to kill Muhammad. He had to flee in the dark of night to avoid assassination. So he beat feet and headed for Medina. It's up the caravan route up towards Jerusalem from Mecca. He and most of his followers, if not all of his followers, eventually made it up to Medina. He had about 150 devotees at that time. He'd been preaching for 10 years and had about 150 people who accepted his religion. Shortly after reaching Medina, he switched his gears completely. He continued to preach the good word as related to him by the angel Gabriel, but he also turned brigand. The people in Mecca were traders, and when his people that he didn't like sent a caravan up towards the Mediterranean, towards the countries that we're more familiar with, he would attack them, and he would steal their stuff, and he would kill their merchants. And to reward his followers, he would give them stuff. And he quickly discovered that giving stuff, loot, to warriors turned out to be a much more persuasive way of spreading a religion than simply preaching. He quickly became leader of a small polity, of a little political entity, a tiny little nation, a government. And he ruled in Medina. He personally fought in battles, at least a dozen battles. He took slaves, he committed massacres, and he gave slaves to his followers. If you could give a teenage girl to a young warrior would think that was a pretty good thing. So he did. In one of the early battles, he fought against an actual. Mecca eventually got tired of Muhammad attacking their caravans, and they sent an army up to settle his hash. And they had a battle up near Medina. And the Meccans called upon the god Hubal to give them victory. Oh, Hubal, grant us victory. But it didn't work. Muhammad won. And Muhammad shouted out the now familiar Allah Akbar. And we generally think of Allah Akbar as saying God is great, but there's a more subtle connotation to that. Habol was not able to provide victory for his followers, but Allah was. And the implication is that Allah is not simply great, but Allah is greater. Our God is greater than your God. And that's something that we need to remember. The next time we see something on TV about some guy in France stabbing a priest and crying out, Allah Akbar, the implication is, our God is greater than yours, therefore I can kill you. For Muslims, Allah is greater than all other gods, and Islam is greater than all other religions. One of the things that he did shortly after he got, a year or so after he got to Mecca, was he wiped out a tribe of Jews, the Banu, and believe me, I am not good at medieval Arabic, but Banu Qurayza, maybe. But anyway, a tribe of Jews. There were three different tribes of Jews in Medina when he arrived. And he had a dispute with them, and the dispute ended by him causing all 800 males in the tribe to be beheaded, one after another. They bring them just like you've seen on TV. They bring them out in little batches and behead them. Another batch, behead them. And he's, according to the stories, he sat on what amounted to a throne with his young bride, Alicia, and watched this transpire before his eyes. And he took a widow, a woman whose husband had just been murdered, took her as his personal slave, a gal named Rehana. And she has an interesting history, and might not get into that. So he was, he has a pretty bloodthirsty dude. After about 10 years, he came back to, in Medina, he returned to Mecca. Remember when he left Mecca, he had 150 people. When he returned, his army amounted to 10,000. So being a warlord is a much more successful career than being a simple street preacher. And before he died, he had he attacked another city in Arabia, and he had 30,000 warriors at his back when he did that. And I want to repeat the quotation from the magazine The Muslim Voice. If anyone wants to know about Islam, one should judge Islam by the Prophet's life and teachings. So, but what about political Islam? What about radical Islam? Remember, what is Islam? Is Islam a person? Is Islam a group of people? No. Islam is a collection of books, holy writings. There can be no adjective in front of Islam. Islam is Islam. Islam does not come in flavors. Turkish President Erdogan said just a few years ago, there is no moderate or immoderate Islam. Islam is Islam, and that's it. And as far as doctrine is concerned, he is absolutely right. Islam is the body of holy words. It is perfect. It comes from Allah via the angel Gabriel to Muhammad to humanity. It cannot be changed because it came from Allah through the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad, the perfect man, by the way, and who has given it to humanity. It cannot be changed. A Muslim cannot change Islam. An attempt to change Islam by a Muslim would be a sacrilege. It would make that Muslim an apostate. And we know what the penalty is for apostasy in Islam. It's death. But why would somebody try to change Islam if it's perfect? How can perfect be improved by making it imperfect? From the perspective of a devout Muslim, Islam cannot be split into regular and radical Islam. Islam is Islam. There's no equivalent of the Protestant Reformation of Christianity is possible in Islam. Islam is perfect as it stands, perfect as it was given originally. In fact, no attempt to change Islam is to become an apostate. No Muslim who we would call a moderate Muslim would be able to change, modify, or moderate Islam. There are no moderate Muslims. Surely there are Muslims who do not go out of their way to, as they say, kill with the edge of the sword infidels, idolaters, and apostates. But that is on them. That is their sin. The individual human, the Muslim, or for him, for the individual human Muslim, Islam, the ideology cannot be moderated. Those who speak of radical Islam either do not know what they're talking about, which is almost anybody in America, or they're deliberately trying to fool us. Deliberately trying to fool us. How does Islam view the world? One, Muslims are morally and legally superior to infidels. As a matter of law, Muslims have a higher place in society than infidels. Men are morally and legally superior to women. As a matter of law, men have a superior place in society over women. One example, in court, testimony of a woman must be given half the weight of the testimony of a man. In the 21st century, there have occurred numerous instances of the execution of women for adultery, but I can't think of a single time when a man has been executed for adultery. It's probably happened and I just didn't notice, but I certainly have noticed many, many, many women in our century, in this 21st century, being executed by stoning. Unfortunately for me, I stumbled across a YouTube depiction of a woman being executed by stoning, and I'm sorry I saw it. But it still happens. I mean, it happens with some regularity. Under Islam, a woman is always dependent for her status in society as an appendage of a man. When she's young, it's her father. When she's married, it becomes her husband. And her her status in society depends on the man that she's attached to. But it could also be, if she's not married and she's an adult, could be other male relatives, could be a brother or a son. Another way that they look at things is all Muslims, and this is
all Muslims, including Shias and Sunnis. Sunnis consider Shias Muslims, Shia consider Sunnis Muslims, just Muslims with improper theology, but they still consider them Muslims, and they're all members of the worldwide Ummah, the community of the faithful. So you can have a guy from Chechnya and a guy from Yemen, and when they meet, they will accept one another as fellow members of the Ummah, the worldwide community of the faithful. But anyone outside of the Ummah is regarded as a lesser person, both morally and legally. And they have an interesting way of dividing the world. We think of the five, how many continents are there?
7.
Anyway, 7 continents. And they divide the world up a little differently. In nations where Muslims rule, even if infidels live there as well, they call Ansar al-Islam. That translates more or less as the house of peace. So if there is a properly constituted Islamic government in a nation, that is a house of peace. But that's not where we live. We live in a place that's ruled by infidels. You know, there's Supreme Court, all infidels. You know, President infidel, Joint Chiefs of Staff, infidels. They're all infidels. So we don't live in Ansar al-Islam. We live in Ansar al-Haram, the house of war. That's where you live. That's where your grandkids live. It's where everybody you love lives, probably. And Islam does not mess about. It is quite clear what the meaning of the house of war is. Now, Islam, the ideology, is a totalitarian ideology. And by totalitarian, I mean that it dictates everything that you do. It dictates, it's written in the book. Who you can marry is written in the book. What you can eat, written in the book. Who you divorce, written in the book. When to sleep, written in the book. When to wake up, written in the book. When to pray, written in the book. The direction to pray, written in the book. Every aspect of the human condition is minutely spelled out and dictated. So in that sense, it's a totalitarian religion. It addresses the totality of the human experience and has an answer for every bit of the human experience and a rule for it. Islam is also a triumphal religion. The goal of Islam is to make every person on earth a Muslim. Admirable, I suppose. You know, Christianity certainly has the dictation to preach the gospel to everyone on earth. But let me put that a little differently. The goal of Islam is to make every surviving person a Muslim. To convert an infidel to Islam might be preferable, but the death of an infidel who does not want to convert is nearly as good. And just in case we think that this is some kind of academic airy-fairy exercise, it really is here we are in Payson blowing off steam about something that we don't really get a grip on, and it doesn't really matter anyway. Since 9/11, there have been over 36,000 attacks by followers of Islam on infidels, on idolaters, on apostates, and on pagans. The worldwide jihad goes on every single day, just as it has since the 7th century. In America, the Muslim Brotherhood We have the Muslim Brotherhood as an active, above-ground political organization. And here's what the Muslim Brotherhood has to say. This is the Muslim Brotherhood in America, not the Muslim Brotherhood in Qatar or Egypt or someplace. The Muslim Brotherhood must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers, so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. So, well, that's all I got. Any questions?
We gotta answer so much more, right? I have a question.
Sure.
How did one of those young women get to take the Quran and do that when she was elected or whatever? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
I'm wondering about whatever her name was.
Yeah, when you take public office, you may swear or affirm that the words, the pledge that you're making to uphold the Constitution, you can do that on anything that you find relevant. Most people, of course, in this country do it on the Bible. Jews would do it on the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. Muslims would do it on the Quran. Lawyers occasionally will do it on a law book. So that's how. There's no prohibition in American law against that.
But how does that relate to upholding the Constitution?
Well, that's something that needs to be addressed, isn't it? It's that obviously is not addressed.
Is this on? Can everybody hear me, or is it just speak?
Just talk loud.
Okay. I was a little bit late getting here, but I probably have something I can share with this group. I actually lived in Turkey for 3.5 years, and I lived in Indonesia, which is a Muslim country. Lived there for 2.5 years. Worked for GE building aircraft engines. And I don't want to contradict anything he says, but I would like to share with you some of Muslim real life as I experienced it. I'm not a Muslim, but I hunted with them. We hunted wild pigs, we hunted birds, we hunted ducks. Got some good friends that own gun shops in Eskişehir, Turkey. And I can tell you, just like in the United States where we have good people and bad people, you have the same thing in Muslim countries. And we can't paint them all with a black brush.
You missed the first part of my presentation. I spent a considerable amount of time illuminating that Muslims are people, individual people. The Muslims that I've known personally in my life, I've no trouble with them whatsoever in any respect beyond that I would have with anybody else. We must not, as you say, paint Muslims with a broad brush. On the other hand, we must always keep in mind what Islam, the ideology, says, written in black and white.
The one experience I'll share with you where it kind of scared me a little bit was my firearms. The gun store owner that I hunted with had the opportunity to keep his weapons in his store because he was a weapons dealer. Everybody else had to keep their weapons in the police station. And if they wanted, and they could only have shotguns, no rifles, no pistols. If they wanted to go hunting, they had to go down to the police station, check out their gun, and then take it back when they were finished. So my gun store owning Turkish buddy, would always invite me to take whatever gun off the shelf that I wanted to carry that day and go hunting. So early one morning, before daylight, we took off. He was driving, I was sitting in the passenger seat, sound asleep, had no idea where I was. When I woke up, we were in a mountaintop, and I get out of the car and I'm surrounded with 23 shotgun carrying Turks. And it dawned on me, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know which direction to go to try to get out of there. I said, I sure hope none of these people hate Americans, because I obviously was not Turkish. And I'll close with one other comment. In the Muslim faith, of course, they don't eat pigs. So the pigs all ran wild, that's why we could go hunt them. They killed them, they ground them up for dog food. The lowest animal on earth is a Muslim who forsakes his religion and takes on a different religion. I was taught that a number of different ways while I was in a Muslim country. So, having that knowledge, and then listening to our ex-president, Barack Hussein Obama, there was such a conflict in my mind, because if he really converted from being a Muslim, which his family was, so he was, and if he really converted, that put a contract on his name.
That's right.
So my position has always been, Barack Obama did not convert. He was Muslim from the day he walked in to the day he left. Because the Muslims themselves would have been going after him if that were not true.
Okay, other question?
I thought I would share that with you.
Thank you.
And I do have some quotes here from the Quran. And remember, the Quran was dictated, comes from Allah to the angel Gabriel, to Muhammad, and from Muhammad to the rest of humanity. The believers, make war on the infidel who dwell around you. Deal firmly with them. Now, is there any confusion about make war on the infidels? Is there anything about that that is not clear? Fight against such of those whom the scriptures were given. The scriptures were given to the Christians and Jews. So fight against the Christians and Jews until they pay tribute out of hand and are utterly subdued. Utterly subdued seems pretty clear. Muhammad is God's apostle. Those who follow him are ruthless to unbelievers, that is us, infidels, but merciful to one another. Remember, within the Muslim community is the house of peace. This admonition to be merciful to fellow Muslims is what Muslims mean when they call Islam the religion of peace. Peace for other Muslims. Ruthless action, however, for unbelievers. Surely, this comes from God to the angel Gabriel, to the prophet Muhammad, to humanity. Surely, the vilest of animals in Allah's sight are those who disbelieve. We also have a lot of things that he said. Remember that his wife had a big part in writing down. And Muhammad said, I have been ordered to fight with the people till they say, none has a right to be worshipped but Allah. Fight in the name of Allah and in the way of Allah. Fight against those who disbelieve in Allah. Make holy war. This also comes from Muhammad. Allah's apostle said, it's kind of putting himself in the third person,
Allah's apostle said, you Muslims, will fight with the Jews till some of them will hide behind stones, and the stones will betray them, saying, "O Abdullah, there is a Jew hiding behind me, so come and kill him." And remember when there's some news in the, oh, well, there's always news about the Israel-Palestine situation on the airwaves, I guess always. But remember, when you hear somebody talking about the Israel-Palestine problem, the problem can only be solved in one way. The problem can only be solved, according to Islam, by killing or driving out all the Jews. So, kind of reinforcing what Ken was saying.
Any other questions? There's Frank.
I can talk about it.
Here.
So this new peace process that's going on with Trump and the Palestinians and Israel, this new peace process that's going on, it can't happen,
Sure it can.
according to the Muslim religion.
Sure it
It
can.
would be
They just
apostates.
they just can't knuckle under willingly. Abbas said 1,000 times no. Abbas, by the way, if anybody old enough to remember the Munich massacre, the murder of the Jewish athletes at the Olympics, that was organized by Abbas, ordered by him. So that's who he is, and he says no. Stepping kind of out of frame a little bit, and speaking to your point, Frank, what is happening since the advent of President Trump is that the Palestinian effort is becoming less and less and less relevant. They tried to do a thing in the United Nations today to diplomatically combat Trump's initiative, and the other, I don't want to say the other Arab nations, because Palestine officially is not a nation, but the Arab nations would not back him up. They left him drifting in the wind. And somebody said something the other day, put it in terms of finance. It is a diminishing resource. So the Palestinian effort may very well be a diminishing resource as events unfold. Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. Uganda is about to do the same, or has just about, maybe just recently, in the last few days, has done the same. Trump recognized the annexation of the Golan Heights. It's been in Israel's control since 1967. So those are things that have actually happened, and they've happened not in the favor of the Palestinian effort, but kind of beside the Palestinian effort. So no, Abbas and his ilk are not going to go for that peace agreement, just as they did not go with the previous peace agreement, just as they did not go with the previous peace agreement all the way back to 1948, when they had a chance in 1948 to have what is referred to as a two-nation solution to the problem. They could have had that in 1948. They said no, and they've said no to every iteration of that, every version of that going forward up until today, and it has not served them well.
I read where we were actually contributing to the Palestinians, the U.S., and he cut them off.
Yeah, Trump cut them off.
So money talks.
Yeah, but Golda Meir said, I think, kind of summed it up sufficiently for my understanding. Says we will have war with the Palestinians until they love their children more than they hate our children.
Right.
And I think that kind of sums up that situation. Jim, do you have something?
Got a question right over there.
Jim.
Oh, Jim.
Are there any predominantly Muslim countries that are not a theocracy?
Yeah, Egypt.
Okay, Egypt.
Yeah, I mean, Egypt is is once again a secular dictatorship. It was a It was a monarchy, then it became a secular dictatorship, and then for just a brief period, it became ruled by the Muslim Brotherhood. And then somehow the Egyptian military got the idea that they would have wealth and good favor with America if they overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood. And sure enough, they overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood, and now it's back to being a secular dictatorship again. Done.
Don. Jim, can you hand me the mic? He's been there before I knew.
Thank you. My wife could probably tell the story better than I can. She worked for, after we got back from Australia, she worked for 6 or 7 different companies, American companies, that treated her very poorly. They didn't treat her with any respect. They didn't give her promotions. She didn't get appreciated for the work she was doing. The first time she worked for a company in which she was properly treated and really advanced, really was touted by her supervisor. The supervisor was a devout Muslim who was married to a Jewish woman. And she had a master's degree in business administration from an Egyptian university.
And Boston University as well.
And so we're back once again to 2 points that we always have to keep in mind. One is we're people, we're complicated. It ain't one size fits all. And the other point that I made and that Ken made, there is a wide variety of devotion in any faith to the tenets of that particular faith.
Thank you.
And you're quite versed in politics. Was there any motivating factor that influenced you?
Hold it up.
Was there any motivating factor that influenced you to dive deeply into the Middle East?
That I'm interested in stuff. I was when I was in my teens and 20s, I was a great fan of the Shah, the late Shah of Iran. I thought he was just a great man. Very serious flaws, as often happens with humans. And in his later years, he lost track of things and couldn't. It's hard being a king or a dictator. It takes an awful lot of effort. They say that the Emperor Augustus would complain, and he says that the people of Rome have no idea how hard it is to govern them. And that's true. I mean, ask Trump. It's hard. Governing anybody is hard. So from my early 20s, I guess, I was interested in Iran. I finally wrote a book that dealt with one small aspect of Iran. But ever since Muslim fanatics murdered 3,000 of my fellow Americans one afternoon, I've been paying a lot more attention to Islam than I ever had before in my life. And frankly, there was no really good reason to pay. I saw Lawrence of Arabia. That was cool. I was like everybody else. It was not really on my horizon. I knew probably as much about Tibetan Buddhism as I did about Islam until the year 2000. So. Jim's right behind you, Shirley.
I would ask too, it's always been said, and I believe that that Islam is antithetical to our Constitution. And that's why I disagree strongly with Ducey wanting to bring more refugees into Arizona than what we were supposedly required to bring in. And if refugees come in as people of the Islamic faith, they're not going to assimilate into our culture. And it's always going to be a problem. It's just not going to be. And I don't understand why internationally, if there's Muslim refugees, why they don't settle in a Muslim country where their cultures can be the same.
Well, there's 3 million Syrians in Egypt, and there's another, I think another couple of million Syrians in Jordan, and probably another million of them in Syria. So somebody's listening to you. Of course, that doesn't account for all of them, but that's an interesting subject. Maybe someday we can get together and talk about the American refugee policy and disassemble its flaws. Shirley.
Okay, so going back to the Shah of Iran in the 1960s, I've seen many pictures where, and I believe it was in Iran, that women could drive, didn't have to wear the habib, or whatever it is, hijab, whatever. And they could go to school, and they had pretty much independence. And so what happened after, because that was under the Shah, was it not, that the women had that freedom?
Absolutely.
So what happened to them?
The Ayatollah
They-
returned.
Well, now when they go to the supermarket, they dress like beekeepers. I mean, that's what happened in Iraq and in Syria under the secular dictatorships there for decades. There was none of that sort of stuff going on. The government had a different ideology. They were Arab socialists. And they were not particularly religious at all, except occasionally if it suited their purpose. And the Shah was anxious to westernize Iran, and he did everything that he could to make that happen, and he was quite successful, at least in the cities. When you got out in the countryside, of course, it's a little slower moving out there, but you can say the same thing about Kabul, Afghanistan, when the communists were running things. They had no interest in religion whatsoever, and so women went to universities, became doctors, and so on. So it's a big world, and there's no kind of one solution or one path that any of these countries have followed.
I would like to make a comment. Well, someone threw out a question one time about what religion has had the greatest impact on Western civilization in the last 100 years. And, they would go through, well, it's not Judaism, it's not Catholicism, it's not the Protestant, and it's not Islam. It's leftism. And we need to recognize that leftism is a religion that's probably more detrimental to our Western culture than probably anything else.
Pretty insidious.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Prager and I would agree with you on that.
Secular humanism. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you all for letting me take up your evening here tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks.